Monica, thank you so much for being willing to connect and share a little bit here at Teaching VR. First off, can you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I am a former New York City public school teacher in grade five, actually, for 6 years.
Oh, great.
My last 2 years in the classroom were in one-to-one iPad, and that's when I started getting really excited about technology integration. And 5 years ago, this month, I started ClassTechTips.com,
Hmm.
which is a website that shares lots of classroom stories, tips, strategies, lesson ideas, new tools. I've just launched a 360 video Thursdays on Facebook and on my blog a few weeks ago. So really excited about the virtual reality space. But
Hmm.
I have a book with Corwin called Deeper Learning with QR Codes and Augmented Reality, and one on formative assessment and technology. Formative Tech is the title of that book. And most of my time now is spent in schools, working side by side with teachers
Hmm.
at larger events, speaking with educators, or writing about education technology.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, now with one of your newer passions and something that you've really been diving into lately with virtual reality, we had talked a little earlier and you had mentioned immersive storytelling with VR. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when I was first handed a Google Cardboard by an educator at a conference, they said, "You have to see this," And then that was a few years ago, and I was then became that person who would pull the Google Cardboard out of their purse to show people, right?
Right,
Look at
right.
this, I found this app that does that, and it makes you feel like you're on a roller coaster. And those kind of early things that just kind of got everyone's wheels spinning. And so I've been really excited about the immersive storytelling component virtual reality for a few different reasons. One of which is watching what the New York Times has done in the
Right.
past year or so, probably more than a year, with their 360 video series, how they've been using that to transport you, whether you watch it on your computer and spin around or you
Yeah.
have it in your mobile headset, really showing what life is like in different places in a way that is hard to do
Yeah.
with an article. It is hard to do, and they can do better than probably playing a quick video in terms of giving you an immersive experience.
Yeah.
I've also been really excited about that kind of storytelling piece from the New York Times, but also hearing stories from organizations like Charity Water. And so they've used it as a way to share the stories of the impact of their organization when they are at donor events or just sharing the work that they do. And so I was really just blown away at what people were doing and what they were creating. And then I started thinking about how to create that content myself, right, to
All
tell
right.
those stories. And for the past few years, I've been working with Lit World. They're an organization based here in New York that does work all over the globe. And we just started capturing video at family and or student programming right now, where we're able to show what happens
Hmm.
during an afternoon session and even hand off the camera to the kids so they can kind of give you a perspective of what their afternoon is like as they're participating in different activities.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned was the New York Times and some of the VR videos that they send out. And I had connected with Michael Fricano. He's over a professional development guy over in Hawaii, and he just did a thing similar to that where it was very much an immersive experience and giving students an opportunity to experience some of the refugee issues in the world right now. And it was for high school students, and they got to put on the VR headset and then actually wore a life jacket. So they kind of really immersed themselves into the experience, and then got to see what that felt like in a sense. You get a little bit more of that experience, and just like you said, I think it's such a powerful tool to share those stories. Um,
Yeah, what
yeah.
an amazing story you just shared there too, with thinking about how you can have different objects and pieces as part of that. I had the chance to go to Adobe Max last year and see a lot of virtual reality, kind of like obstacle course, if you will, right, on their expo floor, and having that kind of rock wall to hold on to while you have your Oculus Rift on,
Yeah.
right, completely changes the experience. And so that's a really special story from that Hawaii educator.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really some powerful stuff. Now, you also have a passion for creating versus consuming, and this is something that I feel like we both share, because I love the creation side and the ability to create now in so many different mediums, but VR specifically. You can really tell a story. Tell us a little bit more about your ideas between content creation versus consumption.
Yeah, so when taking VR and AR out of the equation, I spend so much of my time working with teachers on content creation with student products, and so that's a big part of what I do, is creating opportunities for teachers to start thinking about making and creating with their kids. So when VR really caught my attention and I was excited about the way we could hear stories other people had filmed, I started thinking, right, how can we now create that content? Because the creation was such a focus of everything, I was working on. And so last year at that Adobe Max event, I was really on kind of a fact-finding mission to see, right, how could we do this in a way where I would not need to invest a lot of time and energy diving into new software, diving into editing tools, and that was at a price point that I could explore.
Right.
And so there were a few cameras and a few things people talked about, but I wasn't really sold and ready to jump on anything, mostly thinking that I just didn't have the capacity to invest the time and energy into thinking about capturing content and then making it shareable. And so then earlier this year, I came across the Insta360 Nano camera.
Right.
And that plugs right into your phone or your iPhone. I think they have an Android version as well. And so what that did for me, and what captured my attention with that at first, was that it was a live, you could do Facebook 360 live. So you could do your Facebook live video, which I've been playing around with, in 360. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is wild. It was under $200, and it seemed like an entry point for a bunch of boxes I was looking to check off. And so that's been about a month or so of exploring. The live is not as strong because just with the upload speeds, and I might not have chosen the great location for the first time I did it. Where I'm a little off the path in terms of getting a strong cell signal. But the video capture and the audio capture has been wild. And so I posted a bunch on my Facebook page, which is just facebook.com/class tech tips. I did one yesterday as well. And so you can spin around and you can see what it looks like in different places. And I've been just exploring that from just trying it out, capturing audio, looking at distance, how it feels when I walk and talk. And then last week we were able in programming with LitWorld to capture video within the events, and then hand off the camera to the kids so that they could really get their own view. And so we're working right now on thinking about the best ways to share and gather more content, but it's been a much easier process than I thought it was 6 months ago. And I think that's because the technology is moving so quickly.
That's very cool. Very cool. Now, have you seen that? I'm just curious, your applications that you see with a 360 camera in education. So have you seen 360 cameras? You've been all over the States and the world traveling around working with schools. Have you seen 360 cameras used to create in the school environment?
What I've seen, and a lot of this comes from sharing Nearpod, which is a tool that I love and has a great 360 panoramic, so not video as much as just an image you could spin around and see. And I share that a lot when I'm working with teachers, and they have a wonderful library. And there will be times when I go to schools and that's the first time people have seen virtual reality. They've never heard of a Google Cardboard before. Right. They're all blown away. And there's other times where people might even fall into that bucket, or they might have seen it a little bit, and their next question is, how can we do this? right? Where are we getting our videos? And so I've played around with a couple different tools for just snapping like panoramic images, so still images that teachers have used like for school tours and embedded that in a Nearpod presentation. But when it comes to capturing the video, I think we're still kind of at, I'm not saying it's not happening in different places, because it is for sure. And I follow along and peek at what people are doing on Facebook and Twitter, but I'm not working with any schools right now that are kind of investing in that or are kind of handing it over to their kids right now. But I'm confident it's happening in smaller pockets in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned, the tech is still getting to the point where it's a high enough quality at a consumer level to actually bring into classrooms on a large scale. You're right. You've got to try to find that lower price point, especially in schools. And I know personally, I tried to use some live streaming at a conference I was at recently, doing some interviews. And while I was there, my initial idea was to live stream everything, but the bandwidth isn't there. You've got all this data coming from a 360 live stream, and it's hard to find the infrastructure to support that. So one of the challenges, absolutely. Any other creation tips that you've got for us with virtual reality, things that you've seen come across?
Yeah, so when it comes to kind of the filming and the finding the right space, I've been happy with the Insta360, the Nano. It's been, again, it's probably the same price as a flip camera was 5 or 6 years ago. Right? If you think about that, which is kind of wild. And gosh, I haven't thought about flip cameras in a while, but we used to use them all the time for assemblies and interviews and everything when I was teaching elementary school. But anyhow, it's at the point now where it's kind of at that same place where you're holding it, you're extending your arm. I haven't pulled out a selfie stick yet, mostly because I'm not quite at that level. I'm already at the point where, I like to, find that sweet spot of being, not causing too much of a stir when I'm in a public place filming something. But it's also, I've really been excited about how easy it is to capture audio, how clear the audio is. And we're kind of at this point now where, I'm trying to think through like a best practice, a cheat sheet, like a one-pager, like shot tips, audio tips. And that's been kind of my next step for helping to get other people prepared for trying this out. And the quality for the live streaming is not fantastic, but the quality when you're capturing the video itself is pretty great. And this particular camera lets you upload straight to Facebook and really keep that quality intact, download it as an MP4 file and open it up in their editing software on a computer, and even upload it to YouTube, where I've seen a little bit of the quality decrease. But in terms of a fast turnaround, you don't need to edit anything if you have your 2-minute quick video. I think it's really where things are moving, and there's some nice parallels between that idea of capturing live video when you're shooting 360 video. If you're not looking for a product that is particularly crisp, where you can still have that more of an experience that people are diving into. And so finding not just locations, but special spaces within a school building, within a community. I think you have an opportunity to have kids really reflect on the world around them when they're, putting on that director hat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just did a project a couple weeks ago. We were reading a novel, Holes, in our class, and the project was to identify the point of view of different characters in a scene. And so the students recreated the scene, and I used my 360 cam to film them, and then the class watched the video, and each student could focus on a different character from the scene and focus on their point of view in this story. And so it was fantastic because they reenacted the scene around the 360 cam. And there's stuff like that you can do where it opens up a new dimension for how students interact with content and create content. You're absolutely right. Um, so any final things to share before we sign off here? Do you have any tips for the educational virtual reality community?
Yeah, I think with any types of technology integration, it's always really important to come back to the why. There's a phrase I use all the time, especially when talking about web tools or mobile apps, called the task before apps, is what I always say, right? What's your learning goal? What's your point and your
Yeah.
purpose of doing this?
Right.
And you might have your moments where you do want kids to spin around and see something to grab their attention and dive into a hands-on activity.
Mm.
But what's so special about virtual reality is it really can, set the stage for learning for students who don't have common life experiences with the other children in their classroom,
Mm.
who are working on their vocabulary to explain something they've seen, or are struggling to make meaning of that book before they dive in, right? What does
Right.
it look like if you're out in the desert in holes, right?
Right.
That feel like if you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, you might have a hard time imagining what life is like for those characters. And so coming back to those learning goals that, may have shifted a bit, but are probably at the core of what teachers have been doing for the past 5 or 10 years
Mm.
is really crucial. And I think that anytime we had those pulse checks, it just makes our arguments stronger when we
Right.
talk about technology integration to other people, and that can help them start thinking about being purposeful as well.
I love that. I love that. Coming back to the foundation, what is the purpose behind the content that we are creating or consuming? And I think those are such wise words, because sometimes we do get carried away with the technology itself, and we forget the purpose behind that is to really help students learn and develop what they're doing. And I know that I'm guilty of that from time to time, getting so excited about the new tech out there. But coming back to what is the purpose? Absolutely, I completely agree. So, Monica, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate sharing a little bit and connecting. I look forward to maybe connecting in the future, seeing how your virtual reality endeavors down the road really continue, and you seeing that effect in the world. And thank you again. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you carving out some time as well.
All right. Thank you, Monica. Have a good one.
Bye bye.